Hello and welcome to another rousing edition of Trending Topics with BB. I am your humble host, Brooke Brown, hence the BB. Well, this episode's going to be a little bit different. It's also going to be a little bit of the same. It's in the same vein as a previous series of episodes called The Soapbox. But before I get into that, I want to remind you to log on to the website, trendingtopicswithbbpodcast.com. There you will find all updates and information surrounding this podcast. And as I always remind you, well, not always, but recently, I want to provide more specific episodes to one of the topics that I talk a lot about on this podcast, which is music. I have not recorded such episodes yet, but I'm getting there. However, in order to gauge your interest in these new podcasts that'll dive deep into maybe songs I'm into or artists I'm into and be able to broadcast those songs, I want you to check out the Patreon and become a patron. For just $1 a month, you will find these bonus episodes available in that community. And if you are unaware, Trending Topics with BB is actually under my parent company, BB Media Industries, and if you are on Facebook, you can send me a message or email the pod at ttwithbbpod@gmail.com for access to an exclusive group on Facebook, which is also linked to the Patreon. So if you become a patron, you'll just have all this information there and the links to subscribe. However, I just wanted to let you know that that's where the community tends to check out all of the deets surrounding this podcast and related projects. Also, one last thing. Please, if you are a Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any platform user and you haven't left a favorable rating or comment, please do so. It helps the podcast be found by other listeners that may like this type of podcast. And to all of you out there that have, I appreciate your support. Okay, so this podcast episode's a little somber because about an hour or two ago, the world got news that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has passed away at age 87. And the reason I'm a little depressed from this news is because the trailblazing that she has done in her career leading up to her being one of only 4 women in the Supreme Court has done so much for women's rights in this country and for myself. And leading up to the election that's around the corner of 2020, it is scary going forth. There's a lot of uncertainty based on the political discourse in the U.S. as well as around the world. And with a trailblazer and feminist and amazing woman that has been able to pave the way for a lot of women in an inspirational way throughout her career, even up to her recently passing away. She was a firecracker. So, I do want to let you know that if you want to find out more information from Ruth Bader Ginsburg and those around her, there is a documentary on Hulu. I believe it's still available. It came out in 2018 called RBG. It's a great documentary. Please check that out for all accurate information. If you're a documentary person like myself, it is a very good documentary. But the reason I wanted to get on my soapbox and talk about women's rights and talk about how it pertains to this tragic news, even though it was inevitable being, people get old, people pass away, and in her case she had health complications such as cancer and other issues that has led her to be in the hospital multiple times in 2020 and in recent years. But it's still very sad, and as the news broke on social media, I found a lot of my friends and people I'm acquainted with who are also women feeling the same heartbreak and hardship of the news, mainly because there is so much fucking uncertainty about the future. 2020 has already explained to us how racist this country tends to still be, and I can only imagine if people don't go out and vote down the entire ballot, not just for the president, but figure out who is down the entire ballot to your local politics, like your city council, your governors, your mayors, and also think about your presidential selection in terms of they appoint Supreme Court justices, so they're going to have to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg pretty soon, probably after the first part of 2021. So there's a lot to think about. But being that she's only one of 4 women that have ever been in this U.S. Supreme Court, and now we have lost such a trailblazer. And I can go on and on and on, but I do want to read some notes that I have about what accomplishment she has done in terms of basically kicking ass and taking names. So I want to just read some facts. Did you know that she co-founded the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, which fights for people's rights every day and has been doing a lot of great work in 2020 to combat any racism and other things that have been happening in 2020. But if you want to get involved or learn more, I would definitely check out the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU. I definitely have plans to do so myself. Did you know that she became the first tenured female law professor at Columbia? That's fucking amazing. And that was in the 70s when there were very few women in law, which she had to basically overcome because of her intelligence in law, being in a primarily profession that is full of men, which is pretty much the world. But that was basically a huge compliment because of everything that she experienced and helped experience. And one of the most notorious, and probably why she has the nickname all these years later of Notorious RBG, she argued 6 cases before the Supreme Court and won 5 out of these 6 during the 70s, all on behalf of women, based on sexism in the professional field as well as other in terms of rape and just women's rights in general. And the reason I bring up all of these lovely facts and stuff that you could have Googled yourself or find out from the documentary on Hulu that I mentioned is because as a woman myself who has been, I do stuff that's not primarily looked at as something that a woman would do, but I've never followed any of the traditional ideals and have never led my life that way. I am a feminist. I don't maybe talk about it enough. I probably should, but it is important to me that people read up on women's rights, even as a woman, and understand more about what certain people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RIP, has done for women. And I wanted to get on my soapbox and talk about this on my podcast because I feel it's very important for those out there that may be feeling a little down from the news, or she has inspired you, or maybe people that are young that may find this podcast out there and are like, that is somebody I've heard of, but maybe I don't know enough about her, so maybe I will Google Ruth Bader Ginsburg or check out the documentary or both. But I hope you think about the repercussions coming up in the U.S. election. I know it's probably been beat over your head about voting and what voting does, but it does actually matter. If you want to get involved, if you are a person like myself who doesn't want to live in a country that is basically fucked up. Also, for all of you international listeners out there, maybe if you don't know much about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, check it out. Find out more about what she's done, why you may see a lot of your friends on social media that are part of the U.S. population talk about the trailblazer and amazing woman that she was and what she's done for women's rights. So without just rambling on about what we can do, please think about educating yourself in all manners, but specifically in women's rights, and how maybe you need to take a look inward as well as outward and find a way to vote come November 3rd.